we begin with the top 10 matchup in Eugene and the saddest ballad that Queen Latifah has ever herself performed. UNITY. As Oregon, led by Bo Nix, absolutely pours it on UCLA. The offensive explosiveness was something that I don't think was a massive surprise. I think that for me, it was more that UCLA didn't have the answers, but I want to go ahead and just sort of throw it open here. I don't want to dominate this, but what do we make of Oregon, a team that has one loss? That one loss is to the number one team in the country in the Georgia Bulldogs. Bo Nix, who with 5 touchdowns is absolutely cooking. Like, is this what's the ceiling for this Ducks team right now?
I think Bo Nix has really started to figure out he's feeling comfortable in this offense, and he's going to be part of the Heisman conversation.
A dark horse in the Heisman conversation. If you're going to fully complete the meme, you got to include dark horse in the Heisman conversation.
He's no longer a dark horse. He's a bright horse in the Heisman conversation.
I think the ceiling here is probably Pac-12 champs, because they did lose by so much to Georgia. But think about it over the summer. We weren't really sure what to make of Bo Nix, because he had a couple bright spots at Auburn and normally didn't have good numbers. But Auburn also had struggled to put together an offensive line for quite a while there. And you go out to the Pac-12, and UCLA actually has a pretty good defensive line. But Oregon's offensive line is really nice. They protect him well. I thought Kenny Dillingham did a nice game, and they got the ball out of his hand on some of those misdirection stuff when he needed to. I think this Oregon team is pretty damn good, man. When I saw the money come in on UCLA this morning, I knew I was dead. I mean, not really, because like even nobody bats 1,000, but I was like, oh yeah, okay. If it's going to those books, if they're going to 7, if they're going to like 7, juice 7, this 6.5 is probably dead. I'm toast, and I was. So the main thing I saw here was just the finishing drives, right? Oregon scored touchdowns when it had the opportunity to do so. UCLA stalled out and had to kick field goals. And honestly, like, they both moved the ball pretty well. I still have major concerns about Oregon's defense, but Oregon was able to actually hit the kill shot over and over again by scoring touchdowns.
Yeah, Oregon won this game in the second quarter. Like, they scored 28 points. They had the onside kick. And it was funny. I'm not sure if the onside kick was just like a move of aggression, trying to catch UCLA off guard. But I also wonder if there was timing on it, in that before that, it was sunny and it was nice. Oregon goes for the onside kick, recovers it, scores, and then the clouds and the rain came. So I wonder if part of that strategy was there's rain coming and they wanted to steal a possession and get points on the board, and then force UCLA to come back while down multiple scores in the rain. So I thought that was an interesting thing. But for me, just from a psychological standpoint, like, this is the game Oregon loses and has been losing for the last few years. Like we saw in the season opener against Georgia, like they got crushed, but time and time again, go back to last year against Utah. Oregon looks really good against the teams that it's supposed to beat, runs up to one of the other top teams in the conference and gets beat up. That didn't happen today. So I feel like if you're Oregon, this was kind of a good psychological game, in that you got over a bit of a hump. And I do think that now it's like, them and USC and Utah, and I mean, they're definitely in contention for a Pac-12 title.
Without a doubt in contention. They are the only team with 0 conference losses, currently sitting first place in the standings at 4-0. They've got the head-to-head win against UCLA. They do have a matchup with Utah coming up on November 19th, but that game in Autzen Stadium as well. As a weather aficionado, Tom, it's no surprise that you are into the idea that they would be checking the forecast and have that go into the game planning here. And look, so the recent results have been, for the most part, outside of that Wazoo game, double-digit wins, 40-plus points in pretty much every single game since the Georgia loss. But, all right, nerds, help me out here. Hasn't finishing drives been an issue for Oregon? Hasn't, like, making the most of those opportunities been something where they have fallen a little bit short, at least in terms of making sure that you get touchdowns? Because if that is one of the big takeaways, then that is a great sign for an offense with Bo Nix, with Kenny Dillingham calling it, like you said, that they are hitting their peak at the right time of the season because, look, Cal, Colorado, maybe even Washington, like you can probably be given your B- B game and still be able to maintain your place in the Pac-12 title race. But to beat Utah at home and win that game against Oregon State at the end of the season in Corvallis, I think to know that they are rounding into form has to be encouraging for Ducks fans.
They've been pretty good at red zone the entire season. Like touchdown rate, they're at 73.5% going into today. And that's second in the Pac-12, and it was 20th nationally. And I'm assuming that went up. It's UCLA who's been the one that kind of struggled finishing touchdowns once it got into the red zone all season long. And that kind of reared its head again today.
Yeah, and Utah also struggles with that. So if that trend continues, right, if they meet UCLA again, which they easily could, by the way, right? I mean, like we could get a rematch here. Is this in Vegas this year, or is it home field? Do we know the location for the Pac-12?
I think it's Vegas. I can't say that with 100% certainty, but I think it's Vegas.
Yeah, they moved it out of Santa Clara, which is where it was for a long time. I think they're in Vegas. What's more likely, a Oregon-UCLA rematch or a Utah-USC rematch?
Oregon-USC. Because they don't play each other, do they?
No, I said Oregon-UCLA.
He wants the rematch,
USC-Utah.
Oh, which one rematch? USC-Utah.
Utah was off. USC was as well. What about UCLA? What's the bounce back here? What's the takeaway?
I mean, they fell a little short in the red zone. I don't know who beats them the rest of their schedule, with the exception of potentially USC, and they host them. I mean, and by host, I mean, that'll be probably a 50-50 game. It is in the Rose Bowl. They're still a pretty good football team, right? Like they have an excellent shot at 10 wins. I still think they're a pretty good bet to get back to the Pac-12 title game here. And if they do face Oregon again, it's going to be, can you get a couple red zone stops, and can you not kick so many field goals? Like they move the ball pretty well.
Yeah, but we saw its two weaknesses today. Like the two weaknesses that the Bruins have had is finishing drives in the red zone and getting off the field on defense on 3rd and 4th downs. It was the reason I talked about it during the week. The reason I was on the over in this game is that both of these offenses are great on 3rd and 4th down. Both of these defenses are terrible. Oregon's defense was able to get some stops and hold UCLA to field goals. UCLA's defense didn't get any stops, and that's what's going to rear its head. So when I look at the rest of the schedule, they're probably going to beat Stanford. They're probably going to beat Arizona State. And they're probably going to beat Arizona. But unless they fix those things, they're going to be vulnerable. But when it gets to that USC game, that's an offense that you try to figure out ways to get off the field, because they're going to be able to put up points on you. So that is the concern. But I do think that they're still very much like the Pac-12 is far and away from being decided. It is still all 4 of those teams have a legitimate shot of winning the conference.
Tom, to your point, 18 of 30 on 3rd and 4th downs combined between these two. Like that's really, really good.
That's weird. It was almost as if Tom Fornelli was talking about how both these teams are really good on 3rd downs and how both the defenses aren't. And that was an anchor of his pick for the over whenever he shared it on CBS Sports HQ. Strange.
Were you sweating this in the first quarter when it was 3-3? Okay.
Nah, I knew they were going to get going.
It was a nice live opportunity. I thought. Yeah.
Oh, did you get it live? Like, what did it drop to?
I got a 61.
Hey, that's some value right there.